We begin today's wrestling news and rumors video with some news regarding NXT superstar Nikita Lyons. Now, it was revealed a couple of days ago that Nikita Lyons was sadly being removed from the Women's Breakout Tournament because of an injury, and while some fans were a bit skeptical, it did seem like a real or legitimate injury for Nikita and not a part of any kind of storyline, and it has now been revealed by Nikita Lyons that she has suffered a partial tear of her MCL, but it thankfully does not require surgery, and that Nikita is already starting rehabilitating it. As of right now, there's no timetable on how long Nikita Lyons is going to be out of action for, but these kinds of injuries tend to require at least several weeks to recover at the very least, and a couple of months is sometimes possible as well. In all honesty, this is actually pretty good news where Nikita Lyons is concerned, because there was a lot of worry that this injury could have been pretty bad, thus keeping Nikita out of action for a much longer time, but it has now been revealed to simply be a partial MCL tear, and Nikita will be able to return a lot sooner than some had originally thought or expected. By all means, Nikita Lyons is one of the most promising young stars in NXT 2.0, and let's hope she can regain any lost momentum and continue her rise in NXT's women's division when she does return from injury. But it is clear WWE officials see a ton of potential in Nikita Lyons to do big things in WWE in the future, and this injury is just a minor setback, and she's definitely going to be continuing where she left off when she heals up and returns in hopefully a few short weeks. Many believe Nikita Lyons has the potential and ability to be a future NXT Women's Champion, and to eventually do some big things on the WWE's main roster. And with the way she had been booked up until her injury, there's no doubt WWE feel the same way. So for Nikita's fans out there, don't be too worried, as she will be back and better than ever very soon. Now, for the longest time, one of the last few dream matches that fans wanted to see was Bobby Lashley facing off against the Beast Incarnate Brock Lesnar. And for the longest time, it seemed like this match was never going to happen, partly because WWE had completely different plans for Brock Lesnar, but also because WWE previously booked Bobby Lashley in an unfavorable way, making him not appear as a real legitimate challenge for Brock Lesnar. However, ever since WWE began pushing Bobby Lashley and giving him the respect he deserves and WWE title reigns, this dream match between Lashley and Lesnar only grew in anticipation, and the clash of the titans, so to speak, finally occurred at this year's 2022 Royal Rumble pay-per-view event, which saw Bobby Lashley defeat Brock Lesnar for the WWE Championship, although Roman Reigns can definitely be credited as a major reason for Bobby Lashley getting the better of Brock Lesnar at the Royal Rumble, because Roman's interference in the match swayed things in the favor of Lashley, but a win is still a win. However, that was not the clean win over Brock Lesnar that Bobby Lashley was likely looking for, and this is probably the reason why news has just broke out that Bobby Lashley is once again calling out Brock Lesnar for another match, this time at next year's WrestleMania 39 pay-per-view event, on the grandest stage of them all. Here's what Bobby Lashley had to say when he talked about Lesnar on WWE's The Bump podcast. Quote, "Right now, everybody's looking at, we're in LA next year, right for WrestleMania. If we're in Hollywood, it's a big matchup. For me, I've always had these really tough challenges going into WrestleMania, which of course this one has to be another big one. Me and Brock, we still have a little score to settle. I have a win over him, and then he ended up winning my title back, but we're not done. We're not done, that's first off." Now, this rematch between Bobby Lashley and Brock Lesnar definitely does make sense, seeing as though the Royal Rumble match result was heavily determined by the interference from the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns, so a score does need to be settled between Lesnar and Lashley. With WWE potentially planning a huge WrestleMania 39 match between Roman Reigns and The Rock, this essentially means that WWE don't plan yet another encounter between Reigns and Lesnar, so this does free up Brock Lesnar for another WrestleMania opponent next year. And when we look at the roster in WWE right now, Bobby Lashley is certainly a credible and worthwhile option, especially if he eventually gets his hands on the WWE Championship again, like he has been wanting recently. With that said, would you personally be interested in another match between Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley at WrestleMania next year? Or should WWE move on from that storyline and go in a completely different direction, despite the fact that their first match result was the furthest thing from being a clean win for Lashley? Let us know down in the comment section below. Now actually, before we move on to the next bit of news, we should point out that this rematch between Bobby Lashley and Brock Lesnar doesn't even have to be postponed until WrestleMania 39. Perhaps WWE could work this into their plans for SummerSlam this year, instead if they want to do something else with Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, because Lashley has been trying very hard to get this rematch, and WWE should really give it to Lashley as he does deserve it for sure, and many fans still feel a rematch between Lesnar and Lashley is a must-see dream match. We now have some potentially massive news regarding Sasha Banks and Naomi, and the former women's tag team champions may very well be returning to WWE a lot sooner than some fans originally thought, after the two were indefinitely suspended from WWE last week on Friday Night SmackDown, following Sasha Banks and Naomi walking out of Raw and vacating their women's tag team championships in the process. A lot of fans were skeptical about Sasha Banks' and Naomi's indefinite suspensions from WWE, and felt like things would eventually get resolved to the point where they could return. And it appears as though Sasha Banks and Naomi are soon on their way back to WWE. For those of you unaware, Sasha Banks and Naomi are being advertised on the poster for the June 24th edition of Friday Night SmackDown, which takes place in Texas, and the two reportedly replaced Roman Reigns on the poster for this episode of SmackDown. If this poster was done after Sasha Banks and Naomi walked out of WWE, this could confirm that they will be returning towards the end of June, which means that there may have been some kind of a resolution between Naomi, Sasha Banks, and WWE. Or at least WWE are confident that things will get resolved in time for Sasha and Naomi to appear on the June 24th episode of SmackDown. We now have some sad news regarding Roman Reigns' status for a big upcoming WWE pay-per-view event, and clearly Roman Reigns becoming a part-time superstar for WWE over the last few weeks has really changed the plans the company had in place this summer. So despite being the undisputed WWE Universal Champion, WWE are seemingly going to be having to find ways to plan without Roman Reigns being in the picture for a lot of the summer this year, and this does cause a lot of concern for wrestling fans. If you hadn't known, WWE announced earlier today that the upcoming Money in the Bank Premium Live event on July 2nd has moved locations from the Allegiant Stadium to the MGM Grand Arena, and with this announcement by WWE, the company included an updated poster for Money in the Bank 2022, and Roman Reigns, who was originally advertised for Money in the Bank, is no longer featured on the new poster, indicating that in all likelihood, Roman Reigns will be missing Money in the Bank, and this was something that was speculated a while back when all this news of Roman Reigns becoming a part-timer and taking time off from WWE this summer started to go around. And instead, Cody Rhodes is now featured front and center in the updated Money in the Bank 2022 poster.